Hello, Dr. Indeglio. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Dr. Rick. How are you?
Very good, thanks, Nick. I'm so excited because I'm interested to talk more about your blog. I got a chance to kind of get a little preview of it, and so I can't wait to have you read it and then for us to discuss it.
I'm quite excited myself here, and as the time goes on, we were mentioning last week. We talked about some of the studies from Edutopia, and two of
Hmm.
the studies we looked at. We had that meta-analysis of research stating that good relationships between teachers and students relates to academic achievement, and then additionally, we talked about the study last week that showed tone of voice has an impact on relationship building and academics as well. So
Hmm.
just really, really cool stuff overall. And maybe it ties to the blog today. So
I think it might.
our
Very
blog.
small changes and very big effects. Yeah.
So let's see if I can get a little bit of a share going here, and we'll see what happens. So here comes the blog. This week it's called Simple Sloppy Joes. In the Bible, we find wisdom in the simple yet powerful words, "Do not despise these small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin." Zechariah 4:10. This message celebrates the beauty of simplicity and the potential found in humble beginnings, which is a concept that beautifully ties into our everyday lives. This includes the simple joy of cooking. One dish that perfectly embodies this principle is the classic Sloppy Joe. As Adam Sandler humorously serenaded in his Sloppy Joe song, this dish, while messily delightful, proves that you don't need complicated ingredients to create something delicious and universally adored. At its heart, the Sloppy Joe is a straightforward yet delightful meal made with ground beef, onions, a tomato based sauce, and a few seasonings. These ingredients, often staples in our kitchens, come together to create a comforting and tasty sandwich that's a hit with people of all ages, especially 48-year-olds. The simplicity of the Sloppy Joe reminds us that great food doesn't have to be complicated. It's the blend of flavors, the act of cooking, and the love that goes into the meal that make it special. This idea of simplicity, bringing greatness, isn't just limited to cooking. It's also seen in K-12 education, where simple but impactful teaching methods can greatly benefit students. Instead of complex teaching gadgets or elaborate lesson plans, building genuine relationships with students stands out as a fundamental yet powerful approach. By investing time in getting to know students, understanding their interests, and creating a supportive environment, educators can foster a sense of belonging and significantly enhance student engagement and learning. This relationship building is akin to the basic ingredients of a sloppy Joe, proving once again that simplicity can lead to deep and meaningful impacts. To sum it up, the sloppy Joe isn't just a tasty meal, it's a reminder of the value found in simplicity, echoing the biblical message of finding joy in small beginnings. Whether it's in the kitchen or the classroom, embracing simplicity can lead to amazing outcomes. So let's remember that sometimes the simplest things can indeed be the greatest, whether we're enjoying a messy sandwich or nurturing the minds of the next generation. And there she is, Rick. There she
Uh,
is.
Nick, I love it. I have a lot of reactions to this one. One of them, and I'll kind of back up a little bit to talk a little bit more about the presentation I did out in Arizona a few weeks ago, because the topic was so simple, which really reminds me of this blog. And the emphasis of that presentation was the impact of smiling on kind of the climate of the school and the impact of using students' names when you're talking to them. Like I felt silly in some ways, even presenting on things so simple, and yet the research on these very simple kind of things that we can do as educators, do as coaches, and that we can do as parents. These very simple things can have very profound and meaningful impacts. Let me read just a few of the things. I think maybe in a different podcast I shared a little bit about the importance of students' names, but let me just give you a little sampling of some of the science of smiling. Smiling stimulates endorphins, which make us happy and reduce anxiety. Smiling is contagious. It makes other people happy. Voluntary smiling, or Duchenne smiling, helps to regulate emotions and elicits positive emotions such as happiness. So that means when you make yourself smile, It actually elicits positive emotions and makes you happy. So, can you actually make yourself happy? You can through Duchenne smiling. Happiness, derived from either voluntary or involuntary smiling, causes and is caused by academic success. Smiling is an effective coping mechanism for managing difficult circumstances and distress. Genuine smiling creates an atmosphere of safety and interpersonal trust. Smiling promotes and primes displays uh, I'm sorry. Smiling promotes and primes displays of higher order morality, such as altruism and selflessness. Smiling
Hmm.
enhances empathy and connection with others, strengthening bonds and cultivating healthy relationships. And smiling is a critically important skill which sets the stage for vocational success. That's just a little bit of the research I went over. It was something so simple, right? As smiling. And that's just what came to mind immediately, Nick, when I read this blog. I think it's beautiful. The idea that just doing small things right can have very, very big impacts. So love it. Love it. Whether that's just throwing together the ingredients of a sloppy Joe, or whether it's smiling more, intentionally smiling more to change the culture of the classroom.
And that's I think the beauty of the message in that I love any food analogy that you can make to a topic. And a sloppy Joe is a great one because like any of those items by themselves, not very good. Like if you have ground beef without seasoning it at all, there's not much of a taste. And I mean, it wouldn't still probably better than a lot of other things. However, but it's the seasonings, it's the quality of the tomato paste, maybe a little bit of barbecue sauce or Worcestershire sauce, whatever it is that you add that makes that little bit of zing in the sloppy Joe seasoning. It changes the dish entirely, and it's not something that's complicated. And how
Mm-hmm.
often in life do we just overcomplicate everything? You know what I mean? Like overdo the things which aren't even as important. And it was, I guess, Saturday night this weekend, a little bit chilly. Danielle, we had to ask, when we have the girls, like, what are we going to do dinner wise? And we both were like, sloppy Joes, simple, not a lot of planning. And most of the stuff we had there anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
you just add that little bit of love, that little bit of warmth, and there you go. You've got literally a metaphor, for the types of research we've been talking about quite a bit over the past 2 weeks there. So I feel like it's always a good reminder to keep in mind that the simple things are oftentimes the best things. Another thing that I thought was interesting, and for the purpose of the blog guide, it didn't really elaborate on it, but when they talk about this, do not despise these small beginnings. The seeing the work begin is where we rejoice, and humbleness is something that it ties back to quite a bit. Which we've also talked about, like the importance of humility, whether that's Jim Collins' research and Good to Great, showing that, level 5 leadership, a big component of that is humility, the ability to realize like when we're wrong and, things that are happening there. Or else we can't necessarily fix things that might be happening, whether it's at work, in our families, and our friendships, things like that. So yet another good reminder, and it's something that can be simple. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
is it hard to see sometimes when we need an ego check? Yeah, it is hard to see sometimes, I think. But when we simplify things down to its base and we're asking ourselves the questions, am I doing this for the right reasons? Am I focused on the kids? Am I focused on my family? Then it becomes a little bit easier to see, how easily ego can get in the way and how simple it is to kind of just reframe that and go back to doing things from, the lens of kindness, and, trying to do for others. So yeah, that's kind of where the thinking was going into the
Yeah.
blog there.
Great points, Nick. Yeah, I mean, we've been talking the past few times we've gotten together about some of the simple things that we can do as educators that can make a big difference. We've talked about tone of voice, something as simple as tone. We don't have to buy a big $2,000 package program, right, to change our tone of voice. We can just do that, right? Or smiling more. We talked about that today. We talked in the past about using students' names when we talk to them, right? I mean, these are basic kind of things that I think maybe sometimes we overcomplicate things in education. And I worry sometimes, I don't want to be too much of a skeptic here, but I worry sometimes that that's driven by money and politics. We get too people want to sell their programs and their models and their, it just makes things too complicated. And oftentimes those things aren't necessary. If we do some of the basic things well, we'll have good results. Nick, it also was reminding me of the counseling theory that I think we use maybe more than any other in school based counseling, which is solution focused brief counseling. And one of the ideas of that is just change small things, change some small things, and we'll see big effects. Right? Change one thing, change small things. I'm also reminded of James Clear, his book that we've talked about in the podcast before, Atomic Habits. That's the whole idea of Atomic Habits, right? Start small. Like that's Atom, right? Has incredible power if you just one small thing, right? In fact, we even know from research, and it's almost embarrassing to say, but kids who don't get much exercise, who are stuck in depression and anxiety, taking a 10-minute walk a day is more effective than counseling. And I kind of hate to say that because I'm a counselor, but it's true. That's what the research tells us, right? Something as simple as taking a 10-minute walk a day is more effective than counseling, right? So the simple things are good. And Nick, I love the way you started this because you started it with scripture, and as a man of faith, that really resonated with me. And I'm reminded immediately of the mustard seed, right? And there's a few parables that Jesus gives of the mustard seed, which is a millimeter. I mean, it is tiny, 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 but develops into this ginormous, beautiful tree. Right. And so two scripture real quick that Jesus talks about the mustard seed. Matthew 17, verse 20. Truly, I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it'll move. Big things it's a metaphor, right? I don't think we're supposed to take this literally, but yeah, we can have big change and a huge impact, right? By doing small things. Right? By doing little things, by having faith is one of them. We've talked about that one. Remember a beautiful blog you did for us on faith last year, actually. Here's another one, Matthew 13. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it's the smallest of all seeds, it's the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree so that birds come and perch in its branches. Yeah, I love that, right? So small developing into something so big. And in fact, I think there he's talking about the kingdom of God. And even if we look just realistically what happened, we're talking about one man, right? 2,000 years ago. And now 2.6 billion people in the world profess themselves as Christians. That's the tree, starting with something so very small. So again, a little bit of, spiritual application there for sure. But it's just, there's so much truth woven into this for sure, Nick. And sloppy joes are delicious.
Yeah, I mean, it really you can tie it to both ends, whether it's the bun sandwiching the sloppy joe, or the teachings of Jesus sandwiched in between the mustard seed and the soil for it to begin growing. There's just, I think, again, I hate to extrapolate because, it's like the red lines in the Bible, right? Those are Jesus's words. But I feel like if sloppy joes existed back then, that he would have
it would have been a parable.
Enjoyed
the parable of the sloppy joes. Yeah.
Parable of the sloppy joes. Maybe instead of the loaves and the fish, maybe he would have sloppy joes to feed I guess that's a little informal for like a wedding party, but something to think about.
Yeah. Good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To consider. Since simplicity is our topic, I don't want to beat this one to death. So I think we've hit some key points. You've hit some key points in the literature, and actually referenced our listeners and viewers back to a few of our previous blogs and podcast episodes. So super excited to get some feedback from everyone to see what they think about the simple sloppy joes and all of the possible connections to whatever part of your life you are in your excellent adventure.
Awesome.